Hello, Andrea and Kathryn, and welcome to this conversation about all the exciting work that you've been doing on the thinking environment at Kirklees College. So can we do a little bit of introduction? So Andrea first.
Hi, Joanne. Thank you for having us. So, I'm Andrea Quantrill, and I am the Teaching, Learning and Digital Innovation Manager at Kirklees College in West Yorkshire.
Excellent. And Kathryn?
Hi, Joanne. Good morning. I'm Kathryn Pogson, and I'm a teaching, learning, and digital lead. And there's four of us that work across Kirklees College with Andrea.
Lovely. So great to have a team effort here today. So I'm Joanne Miles. I'm a consultant and a trainer and a coach in the FE sector. And I've been aware of the work in the sector around the thinking environment for some time. But then when I came to the AP Connect conference, I was lucky enough to be in your session and got really excited and interested to hear a little bit more about the work. So to start us off, do you want to say something about what the thinking environment is for people who may not be familiar with it?
Yep, sure. So for us, the thinking environment came out of Joy FE in the lockdown, and that's very much where I was introduced to it. But the thinking environment has a series of core components, which you can see on the screen there listed on the right-hand side. And those 10 components are absolutely vital in order for the space to be a thinking environment. And there's a quote on screen there from Nancy Klein, who coined time to think and this way of working, which I just think speaks volumes, Joanne, and really talks about that, taking that time to think, and the quality of everything that we do depends on that thinking. Do we give ourselves that thinking time? Do we give one another that time to think? And those components there on the right that are held in that space really allow us to do independent thinking. What do you think, Kathryn?
I think the thinking environment is a way of being, and having worked with it's actually a big part of our lives. It's how we raise our children, how we interact with friends, with family, and to bring it into our workplace as a concept. And as Andrea said, holding those 10 components in place so that other people can do their best thinking and be their best selves is what we really value as educators.
It's such an interesting thing that you feel it extends beyond a tool that you might use in a training session or something for a CPD piece of work that you're doing. And some of these aspects, I think particularly I'd like to just know a little bit more about. This notion of ease is something I think I'm not familiar with. So Andrea, can you say something for me about ease?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the best way to explain that is imagine yourself being in a meeting and wanting to share your thoughts and not knowing when to jump in or when you're going to get your turn. And that can feel really, put you really ill at ease. And the component of ease in the thinking environment is setting up a space where you will know you will have an opportunity to share your thinking. You will not be interrupted in that space. And that's an absolute promise and guarantee. And because you know you won't be interrupted, because you know the time, you're going to share that time between you, and that links with that component of equality as well, you get a chance to really unpack all of your thoughts. And that has a real kind of calming sense, actually, to the point now where if I'm not in a thinking environment, I feel really ill at ease at trying to get in and say what I want to say, because I do not want to interrupt anybody else's thinking.
It sounds like a really liberating thing for people to really allow them to free their thinking and express and articulate that through use of ease. I love that. Something about incisive questions, Kathryn.
Wow. I'm fascinated by questions and how the language and use of questions can just unlock people's thinking. And as we sort of get on and talk about the different applications of the thinking environment, how just one question can unlock somebody's thinking for 30 minutes, for example, or how, the power of just the question, what do you think? What do you think, feel, or want to say? What more do you think, feel, or want to say? But something that we're interested in doing more work on is there's an incisive questions framework, which can help support people to maybe unlock something or think about something where they're assuming something's blocking their thinking or blocking their progress, and how as practitioners we can support that.
Really interesting, because it brings to mind for me things around choice of words, choice of focus in questions, all those things that also link through to conversations that we have in a coaching setting as well. So there's a kind of crossover with some of the things that you're saying, I think, into other aspects of practice around communication as well. So let's move on and think about applications and how you've started to implement them. So Andrea, do you want to make a start in terms of that left column maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. And just aware that some people might never have heard of thinking environment. And actually, there's some great tools online to start to explore what that is. But for us, there are certain applications of the thinking environment. And the thinking environment is very much a space which holds those 10 components and allows for you to work towards being an independent thinker. So thinking environment applications we've got listed there. So thinking rounds, an opportunity really for everybody within a space to have equality of voice and for them to share their thinking against a particular question. And we always make sure those questions are open. And that's the incisive questions that Kathryn was speaking about there. So the more open the question, the better. We don't want to be directing somebody, down one leg of the trousers, as the wonderful Lou Mycroft says. So thinking rounds is where everybody within a space will go around that circle or around that online space, and we would share that time out, and everybody would have that opportunity to share their thinking around a question. Kathryn, do you want to talk about dialogue?
Yeah, I think as well with the thinking rounds and all these applications, Joanne, it's important to say that we always start with the question, how are you? And how important that is as a practice of care. And when we say, how are you? We genuinely want to know how you are, not, oh, I'm fine, everything's fine. It's a genuine interest in caring about people. So in terms of dialogue, we something that I learned was about the thinking round, where obviously everybody has a turn. In terms of a dialogue, it is a conversation, but the components are still held in place, and it's still an equal space for thinkers. But when you sort of hand over to the next person, so you do your thinking, hand over to the next person, what do you think? Then that person can take up with their thinking. So best between maybe 2 or 3, but are still focused around a thinking round, but more of a conversation.
And I think as well, and Kathryn pointed out there about how you structure a thinking environment, and always starting with that, how are you, that practice of care. There are certain structures to uphold. So knowing when somebody has finished their thinking, and being really aware of when it might be your turn then to join that conversation or add on your thinking, because often we assume somebody has finished their thought, or we do the can I just add, and therefore we're kind of taking more of that space for ourselves. You've got to be really aware of yourself when you're in a thinking environment, giving your attention to the person who's thinking, waiting for your turn to speak, and that's okay, and being at ease with that. And in all of these applications, it's about sharing that equal space. So when we start looking at things that are in kind of 2s or 3s, such as pairs, very much working with another person. And there's a couple of applications there where you can do your thinking and then hand over to your partner by saying, what do you think? And again, those key questions come back. Or indeed setting a time and each person speaking for 5 minutes or 10 minutes without interruption. And that can be really quite a difficult application. But, I think Kathryn and I are at the point now in our work in a thinking environment where we can talk for 30 minutes without needing any of the questions or framework to unlock our independent thinking. And I think we're often capped in our thoughts by time, by the people jumping in. And then we've got Thinking Council, which Kathryn has modelled brilliantly with our students. And on the right there, we kind of talk about using those things with our students. So Kathryn, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, the Thinking Council is an effective way for somebody to bring an issue or a problem or something they want to think about, but get the perspective of other people, not advice, but other people's perspective and thoughts on their situation, their issue. So I use that with I'm a teacher educator. I use that with trainee teachers, and I don't do it every week, but I've got to the stage with them where they might come in and say, oh, I need a counsel tonight. I've got this issue, I need a counsel, and get the perspective of their peers in terms of how they might move forward with that issue, and just to support their own thinking. But it's just really powerful, and particularly the trainees really value that space and that time to discuss that. And I just wanted to mention about pairs that Andrea and I are really fortunate to work in a team where we can just ring somebody up and say, I just need 5 minutes. And the other person knows that means we're in a thinking environment. Kathryn needs to think through something. I'm just going to give her my generative attention and that will help her to find the solution that she needs. So it's become another way of working, really, and I feel really fortunate that we're in a position to do that.
It's really interesting you talking. I'm thinking as I hear you, it's mindset here, it's respect for other people, it's a way of thinking and communicating and relating to other people. So I can see how this can fit into so many different settings. So from your list on the right, I can see multiple applications. So this is not a one-trick pony tool. It's a way of operating in many different environments. So do you want to say something about the different contexts and the different ways that you used it? Andrea, start us off.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have used it in such a variety of ways. And like Kathryn said at the beginning of the talk, it is a way of being.
Yeah.
And I think once you start to explore the components and the idea of not interrupting people and are we really listening, it changes the way that you start to go about your everyday. So even in any meeting now that we host, we always try and implement, an order in the chat, and should we make sure everybody has a chance to speak, and try not to interrupt people in a lot of the things that we do. But thinking spaces at Kirklees College have developed over the sort of last 18 months. So we open up ideas rooms and thinking spaces in the week. And it's an opportunity for staff to come into that space, and we follow the how are you round. We'll do a thinking round, and we always bring that back at the end with a close at what's live in you. It's a really easy space to facilitate, but you have to be strong at facilitation in holding those components. We've been through a bit of a journey, actually, because originally we opened up thinking spaces for leaders and managers. And we did get quite a few of our managers coming in and allowing themselves that hour to really think through some ideas, some problems, whatever they wanted to bring to that space with other people. And then in our work on the thinking environment, we started to look at that component of difference. And actually, were we capping that difference by saying this is for leaders and managers? So we've been on that journey as well, on that journey of equality and thinking about opening up those spaces. Anybody can come in. We are all equal thinkers in that space. It doesn't matter where you are in a hierarchy, because role, rank and ego are left at the door. And that's really, really important. A teacher can have most fantastic thinking. They don't have to be a manager to push forward ideas. And it's unlocking that potential and seeing that. And I think that's what the thinking environment does. And just to mention there before, I'm sure Kathryn will jump in on this as well. On our journey, we've thought about just plugging away at the thinking environment in a lot of the things that we do as a teaching and learning team. But our college has really picked that up now and are really interested in that work. And our recent whole staff conference day incorporated 2 thinking rounds in teams. And the feedback that we got from that was fantastic. People saying they felt heard, people saying they had an opportunity to think. And just adding in terms of the applications, if you've got people in your teams or your colleagues who might not have an opportunity to speak up, or you've got louder people who always maybe take that limelight, these applications really allow that equality of space, so everybody has a chance to be heard.
I think for me, particularly thinking rounds with students, I mean, I'm still a teacher, and I'm a teacher first and foremost, really, but the thinking environment underpins my pedagogy, and I always start my session with the thinking round, and that didn't change, you know, throughout the pandemic, being online or anything. And we get in a circle, and the questions are, how are you? What have you seen, heard or read recently? What questions has it raised for you? I started that on day one. We still do it now. Students are now comfortable with that. At first they were a bit, who is she, what is she doing? But they're comfortable with that now. They expect it. They come ready to think about what they've done and what they've seen. They're sharing what they've read. And I just think it's really enriched the programme. It's enriched the community in the classroom, because from day one they were sharing what they've been doing in between when we last met, and how that's related to their teaching practice. So what's really satisfying and joyful is that I go and observe trainee teachers, and they're doing it with their students, and it's rippling out. And also, you know, not just trainee teachers, but supporting teachers in Kirklees College to do that as well, which, you know, we want to do more of. So the next thing that we applied to this was the ThinkFest events. There you can see the hashtag ThinkFest events, and that was part of the Skylark project that we were part of as part of AP Connect, and part of the project was to run an event. And we were doing this work, and we thought about, in an ideas room, how can we incorporate this work into this event? So we ran the event in a thinking environment. We posed the questions beforehand, so people had a chance to maybe think about them, but also to think about things that were of interest or that were relevant to them. You know, things around joy, empathy, trauma-informed practice, you know, the things that we need to be talking about. And we opened breakout rooms, and external networks came, internal. The principal of our college came to the first one. Assistant principals came to the event, and it just felt really, well, brilliant to get the message out there, how valuable this space is and how important it is to have these opportunities to come together and think through these things. So something we're going to continue into the next academic year, because it was, yeah, such a buzz. And also we were starting to have some meetings in thinking environment, and, you know, again, as we sort of progress through this conversation, the work that we're still working on and what we hope to achieve.
It sounds as if it's something that really you need to experience it to feel what it's like to be in that space, and how people relate differently from how they would relate in a normal conversation with each other, to see that impact. So I can imagine that creating opportunities for it all the way around college life is a great way of getting people sparked and interested and curious. So I think I really love the way you've created different opportunities with different audiences to bring this into the culture. It sounds like it's a potentially a culture affecting piece of work. Andrea, what strikes you about that, the culture angle?
Yeah, absolutely. It is that, because, you know, we are I think 18 months into a culture change in our college, and that's going really positively. And Kathryn and I have often had a conversation about, how do we get more people into these spaces? How do we get it out there more? Because it is about being in it to appreciate what it is. And we're continuing that work. But by exposing people to these spaces, by allowing them opportunities to experience being in a thinking round or a thinking pair, you know, it is a completely different way of working. And, you know, staff are then coming back for more and are more interested in what this is and how to maybe facilitate that space. And you talked about different audiences, Joanne. I think you're absolutely right. A lot of our staff are interested in how you would apply this in the classroom, rather than thinking about themselves and their own independent thinking. So there's a couple of, you know, different aspects there. And I think it's just about making that shift to saying, we want our staff, we want our colleagues, our students to be independent thinkers. We're not going to lock their potential, and this is the way that we're going to do it. So, you know, there's lots of work going on around thinking environment across different colleges, and Kathryn and I also really involved in those networks so that we continue to grow our practice as well. There's lots to still explore around this.
It sounds like it's a huge learning journey, but I think that's given people a lovely summary. So thank you for that.